Why are people listening to us today?
Well, they're listening to us, Nigel, because they want to raise money for things.
Welcome to the How to Raise Money podcast for anyone who wants to raise other people's money for a business or property venture. Right now, there has never been more money on the planet, and there has never been more opportunity. This podcast will help you put the two together. So, if you need money for your business or property proposals from banks, lenders, angels, whales or dragons, this is the podcast for you.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the How to Raise Money podcast with me, Ray McLennan.
And it's with me, Nigel T. Best. Raymondo, how the devil are you, sir?
Yeah, cracking on and cracking up at the same time, getting there slowly but surely in this what seems to be crazy world. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just where I'm looking. Everything seems to have gone to hell in a handcart.
Well, I tell you what, Ray, I'm going to give you a recommendation right now,
Oh yeah.
because I was listening to it and there's so much truth in it. In terms of, in the same way that if you look at your stars, the astrology, and you look at it and you go, oh my goodness, that's it, that's me to a T. And then you go, hang on, I'm not Sagittarius. And then you go, oh yeah, that's it, that's me to. No, I'm not Libra either. And you
Yeah.
look at them and you can make everything fit. But this is a really good one. So, in the past, Ray, we've talked about a book called The Fourth Turning,
Mm-hmm.
which has got real sort of impetus over the last, 10 years. Well, since the crash of 2008. Because
Yep.
when they wrote it in the 90s, they said this is what could happen in the next 10, 15 years.
All right.
And they went crash, pandemic, and all the rest of it. They said these are the sort of things. So that's gained huge momentum. Well, they've written, one of the authors from that passed away just before the financial crash, so best part of 20 years ago. But the other guy, Neil Howe, has written a follow-up saying the fourth turning is here. And
Right.
we are living through the fourth turning before this big reset in kind of 2030. So in the next 5 or 6 years, it's all going to come to a head and we're going to have a reset and everything's done. It's based on historical trends of supposedly 4 20-year periods on average, sort of a lifespan-ish of
Mm-hmm.
people. And each cohort has certain characteristics. And I'm a Gen X. So Gen X is 61 to 81 or something like that. And, I fit into that. And he describes how Gen X people are. And it's probably why I gravitate to other Gen X people because we all think the same. We all
Yep.
think the same way. And we all think that authority is a bit nuts and don't trust it and all the rest of it. And yeah, folks, go out and read The Fourth Turning is Here. And if you haven't read The Fourth Turning, read that one first and then read The Fourth Turning is Here. It's kind of horrifying, frightening, terrifying, anxiety inducing. But then at the end of it, you kind of go, yeah, but we'll be all right. And it'll all work out in the end. And there's not a lot you can do because we're going to go through this. And Ray, if you read that one, because we haven't spoken about this, when
Mm-hmm.
you say it's exciting times, yeah, read that and you'll go, yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. That's where we're going. This is it. It is building to that. And
Mm-hmm.
you just got to hope that some nut job with his finger over a little red button doesn't actually sneeze and press it, sort of thing. Um, but yeah, a good recommendation. So anyway, yeah, I digress. Why are we here today, Ray? And I don't mean in a general philosophical way. I mean,
And from the feedback we've had and various other things, uh, comments and contacts, we're sort of doing a back to basics series here, and we're going to talk today about the process of buying a house. How do I start the process of buying a house? We're going to talk about, things like credit score, how much down payment you need, and the steps involved, that sort of thing. So that is for I think it's Anne who asked that specific question. I don't know what age Anne is, but I suspect she's not Generation X. I suspect she's younger. Yes, younger people who do listen to this podcast, and not just in the UK, but we've got people in Australia. We've got someone in Sierra Leone. Thanks to that person in Sierra Leone. and lots of people in America, obviously. So how do we start the process of buying a house? Well, I cast my mind back. I'm same generation as you, Nigel, and I cast my mind back to when I first started looking at getting a house. And I was kind of overwhelmed by things. You go to an estate agent and you see the houses that are there and so on. And of course, the one you want is not the one you can afford, especially when it's your starter house. And I just thought I found speaking to estate agents was not terribly helpful because, as you'll say one price and they'll say another, and you've got to decide, yeah, well, not just what kind of house, but the starting point is really how much money have you got? How much money have you actually got? And the thing is, people don't really know because nowadays you're talking about generation rent and you're talking about having to save massive amounts of money, and that's out of reach for most people. So they're going to, the bank of mum and dad, who hopefully will be able to help them to buy the property they seek, and then you've got payments and all the rest of it. But the fundamental mistake that a lot of people make, as you pointed out, as the accountant of this duo, is people calculate how much they need by way of a deposit, but then forget about all the other things, because it's not just a matter of putting down a deposit and that's it, you're in the house. There's a whole host of other things that you will have to pay. So starting the process of buying a house is really sitting down with a bit of paper and working out what your costs are going to be. Find that magic figure. What is it you need? And then you will be able to extrapolate and see the amount that the bank will give you. Now, when Nigel and I were lads, when we were lads, and we were looking at getting a house, it was the ratio between what you were earning versus the price of houses was about 3 to 1. So if you were earning 10 grand a year, the house prices were 30 grand, right? Well, now it's 8 or 9 to 1. And that's a tricky hill to climb. That's a tricky obstacle to overcome. But can it be overcome? Yes, it can. Now, back in the day, we had our challenges. Inflation was very high. Interest rates were higher than they are now. Jobs were thin on the ground. It was, Thatcher's 80s, which was yo-yoing up and down and getting better and then getting worse and then getting better and so on. And it got really good and then it went really bad. And then interest rates went to 15%. Do you remember that? I had a mortgage then. I remember that clearly. So every generation will get its challenges. And it's about being able to overcome those by being resourceful, by planning ahead and looking ahead. And that's why Nigel mentioned that book, The Fourth Turning. That gives you an opportunity to look ahead and plan ahead. And I'm going to insert some subliminal messages in here just now. Buy silver, buy gold. So there's some subliminal messages in there for you, not so subliminal. But look ahead and be prepared. And the more prepared you are for anything, the easier it becomes. So when you're starting the process of buying a house, it's all about planning. It's all about planning, drafting things out, and then speaking to, speak to some experts. But I would caution, I suppose, speaking to, I was nearly going to say unintelligent people. They're not unintelligent. They're misinformed. A lot of the time people are misinformed. A lot of the time people will tell you what worked back in the day. We're going to tell you that, but we're also going to tell you what works now, because that's the sector we're in. We are in the sector of speaking to property professionals who tell you what's going on. And, I suppose today's young property buyers who are just trying to get on the market, they're going to turn to the people they know, which is their mum and dad. And their mum and dad are going to say, well, we can help you buy the mortgage. But, when we bought it, it was quite simple. It was this, it was this, it was this. Things have changed ever so slightly. And it might be that if you're buying a house, you might not want to buy a house to live in that house. You might want to buy a house to rent that house. Or you might have to buy a house that you share with other people that you know. So it's not going to be as straightforward as, well, you'll buy a house, you get married, you have kids, and carry on paying the bills and everything's fine. That would be wonderful, but it's probably not going to happen like that. So you need to sit down and kind of work out for yourself what the obstacles and challenges are, and then take it from there. So Nigel, in terms of buying a house, how much down payment do I need to buy a house, do you think?
Well, here's the thing, folks. It's anything from £1 upwards. Is a simple way of saying it, and you're probably thinking, "What? That's crazy." But just going back to the process, right? I'll go through this kind of process that went through my head when I kind of had some money for a deposit and I was looking for a house. I looked for the biggest house I could get and then went even further and looked at houses that I had no chance of getting, fell in love with all sorts of properties that were so far out of reach. It was insane. And then always felt with the one I ended up with, I got cheated, overpaid, and all the rest of it. So it is a mindset here, folks. When you are looking for how much money do I need to raise? How much money do I need for the overall process? The process involves estate agents, solicitors, financial advisors, banks, yourself, your friends, your family, and all these things, your job, your credit rating. There are so many things involved. So let's go back, Ray, just back a step. These, when we were buying our first house, I remember you went down to the estate agent and you got a stapled couple of bits of A4, and glued to it were kind of 2x1 photos, proper photos, printed out photos, glued onto the piece of paper. And I find myself, Ray, just realizing how much technology has affected me, because I picked up a magazine, and it was a house building magazine, and it showed this picture of this semi-constructed house, and I couldn't quite see it. So I put my finger and thumb on the magazine image and tried to expand the image. And I was thinking,
Yeah.
this bloody thing don't work. And then I caught myself thinking, it's a magazine, you fool. But in the old days, we had a tiny photo of a sitting room that had god awful carpet on it and what have you, and some gold velour settee that had tassels down the side and things like that. And you looked at it and you went, "Ooh, that looks like it might be worth a look at." And it was really hard to find houses. You had to go to lots of estate agents to try and do it, to cast your net. If you didn't know an area, you didn't even think about it. Now, the process is you put in what sort of house price you want, where roughly you want it. You can draw it on a map, and up comes what's available. And you are inundated then with all the sort of properties that you can do. And the problem with this, folks, is you are always being shown things just out of your budget range. In the old days, when you went to a car showroom, I remember going, with my dad, and it would be to try and get the most basic car you could. And you went in, and the guy in the showroom says, "Oh, well, we haven't got that model. We've got this one," which he might as well have just had a big sign saying this has all the bells and whistles. And by bells and whistles, I mean it had a rear windscreen wiper. It had not only a radio, but a cassette with it. They were the things. Heated rear windscreen. You just went, whoa. And you sat in that velour. There's a theme here, isn't there? Lovely padded seats, comfortable things. Sometimes they even had seat belts in the back and things like that. So he sat you in something and then said, obviously, the car that you want doesn't have this, doesn't have that, doesn't have the other, and all the rest of it. And you left thinking, I need to get that posh car. Well, that same marketing is happening to you now with properties, because when you put in your criteria and it says, here are 4 in the area, it will then show you some, maybe not quite as close, maybe another mile away, 10,000 more, 5,000 more, 15,000 more, and you click on them. And before you know it, you've done that process 3 times and you're looking at houses 30 grand above your budget. Folks, we see it on TV. Kirsty and Phil, they ask the person, or when you're buying abroad, these things, Brits abroad buying it, they say, what's your budget? Well, we got 190,000, and that's with everything. Is there any wriggle room or contingency? Well, we could put another 10 10, maybe 15,000 in. Obviously, if we sell the kids and get rid of the dog and stuff, and they go, right, so your budget's 205. Here's one at 215.
Yeah.
And they sell them it and they go, oh, how are we going to do it? Folks, rewind and say the process is I've got to pay potentially an estate agent, a solicitor, an accountant, a bank, and their fees for any lending. You've probably got to borrow some money. You've also
Surveyor.
got to do this and that and the other. They're your fixed fees for doing
Yep.
it. Take that off any money you think you might be able to get. And then you can start saying, right, that is my absolute upper limit. But what people fail to realize is that you don't include the cost of decorating, moving a wall, a new kitchen, changing that bathroom, a new carpet, furniture, food, water bills, gas bills, council tax bills, and all the rest of it. Folks, there are so many bills when you are owning and running a house that it's frightening. And what everyone does is they buy at their absolute limit, whereby they think, if I can just afford the house, then I can spend everything on just affording the house. The trouble is you need an awful lot of sort of cash to keep the house going or change it. And how many people move to a house, they then borrow on credit cards for a new kitchen, or they take out extra loans for a bathroom and things like that, and then it all implodes. The secret in the process of buying a house is get an amount and then look at houses 10,000 less than that. Give yourself some stuff and then negotiate hard as well. But Ray, how much deposit do you need? Hey, as much as possible is a good idea, but I would say if you can save, say 10,000, think to yourself, right, 8,000 is to help with the deposit, 2,000 is for cash for bills, unexpected costs, and all the rest of it. So we always underestimate the cost, don't we, Ray? We never quite do it. And one of the things, Ray, we've spoken about this for years, haven't we? Is if you're pitching to someone to raise money for a venture, property, business, and all the rest of it, what investors are looking for is, have you considered all eventualities, all costs? Because what they don't want to do is lend you 100,000 for a project that clearly is going to cost 130. Because generally that means that it's going to fail because you're going to be short of money. So you've got to do the same thing here, folks, when you're buying a house. You've got to be realistic about all the costs. You've got to be realistic about how much deposit that you might need, and you've got to factor it in. So I need 100 grand mortgage. I need 15% deposit. That's 15 grand. Yeah, but what about your 5 grand for legals and things? What about all the other costs that get involved in it, moving, buying furniture, as we say, all those things. In reality, you don't need a mortgage for 100 grand. You need a mortgage for about 120. But they're not going to lend you that because they only lend against the value of the house, not the value of the house plus all your costs. So the process, folks, is horrible because you've got the biggest candy store, sweetie shop in front of you showing you all these amazing properties in all the right places, and everyone wants the biggest, the best, the nicest, everything else, but it's all designed to make you spend more than you've got. And the trick to it is to really be disciplined and think to yourself, if it's your first house, this is not my dream house. This is not my ideal house. This is the starter. This is the first rung of the ladder.
That's it.
Take it dirty, take it nasty, take it in not quite the nicest street, get in, do it, see the value go up and move on.
Yeah, and don't forget, you can do things like shared ownership as well. It's not just about you owning completely. You can do shared ownership, which is you and someone else, or you can do shared ownership, which is you and the house builder, or shared ownership, which is you and a local authority or some other organization that will do that. So search around for those kind of things.
And also, right, don't forget there is a tax break. There's a rent-a-room tax break. So if you've got someone that comes in and rents a room, so maybe it's a friend and you own the house, but they rent a room from you, and it becomes a bit of a shared house. There is a threshold. I don't know what it is. It's probably about £5,000.
Used to be 7,000.
7,000, is it? So that's 500 quid a month, and the reason the government brought that in was because so many people were doing it. Nobody ever declared it on their tax returns as income. So you can do that. So if you think to yourself, right, if I could get a friend who could come in and rent a room, share it, I did it. I did it. I got a house, and at one point I had I think two or three people, mates who needed somewhere for a few months or whatever, and they paid me a bit of money. It was great. It was great. Then I got married and kicked them all out, and my days of going to the pub were well and truly over.
There is a threshold. It's £7,500 a year, tax free, from renting out furnished accommodation in your main home. But if the income is shared between multiple people, i.e., joint owners, the tax-free threshold is reduced to £3,750 per person. So yes, there is. So to qualify, the room must be furnished, it must be in your own home, and you must live in the property at least part of the time. And tax-free threshold covers all rental income, including any charges for meals, cleaning, or laundry. But you cannot claim expenses relating to the letting if you use the rent-a-room scheme. And it's all about filling in a tax return and so on and so on. So there you go.
Yeah. So
yes, it's still, and that is as where we are, August 2024. That's the threshold, £7,500.
So folks, factor it in.
For years. Hasn't moved for years.
No, but it is still useful. If you've got someone at 500 quid for a room, it's brilliant. That could really help. Cover some of the costs, or enable you to do the upkeep and things like that. So maybe factor that in when you're looking for a house. You're looking for a 1-bed flat, or do you get a 2-bed tired house? It might be you get the 2-bed house, and it might be better for you. But I tell you what, Ray, before I forget, one of the things that a lot of people are noticing these days, if you get an apartment or a flat or something in a shared block and there is a service charge, that service charge can be really quite eye-watering. It can change. It can go up, down, always up, you should know. And it can be, I've seen some where people are paying best part of £1,000 a month for their service charge. And there are ways that you can kick out the management companies from them, but they are difficult, and you need a volume of people to do it if you feel that you're being ripped off. But I saw a headline of someone saying that they had paid a high service charge and the company had £250,000 in their bank account from all this service charge, and then they said they no longer had that money and they disappeared. So be careful. That's a hidden cost in there. So the process of buying a house, as Ray says, be absolutely brutally clear and include everything in terms of working out how much you can actually afford, how much you need to raise, and how you're going to do that, because it is expensive. But always remember, if you're raising money to buy a property, look at it more on the long term. And by long term, I'm meaning 10 years plus. Because it's really weird, Ray. I can't remember. At the time, it seems the most important sums ever. And the amounts, you're arguing over 50 quid and stuff, and you're totting it all up, and you realize how expensive it is. Looking back, those sort of 30 years, I can't remember what those figures were now. So that's what I mean about long term. In the long term, you just know that having bought a house and got on the housing ladder, it was worth it. So, you can panic and you can get stressed and all the rest of it if you want, or you can take a deep breath and say, hold on. This fee on the mortgage is £1,000. I'm going to do this probably for 10 years. I'll be with this lot. So it's actually only £100 a year. which is only £2 a week. Okay, that's a little bit more realistic, and breathe easier. You know, the media is very good at hyping up anxiety in terms of all sorts of things. But when you divide it, if you're going to own a property or be in property for the next 50 years, every cost you've got, divide it by 50.
Yeah.
And then you realize, okay, that's not such a bad investment when you look at it. So the process is complicated, but it's straightforward. But the only person you can't fool is you. So if you keep telling everyone, oh yeah, I've got everything covered, but at night you wake with sweaty palms thinking, how am I going to pay for that bill and that bill and that bill? As I say, the only person you can't fool is you. So don't even try. Add it all up, tot it all up, and then probably start looking at properties 10, 20 grand less than you thought you could afford.
Indeed. Wise words from the wise man, the accountant, that is Nigel Best. Well, on that.
Oh, sorry. I'm glad you clarified it was me, because I was thinking, who's that guy?
On that,
I'm not sure it is me, by the way, folks. But
on that calculator bombshell, I've been Ray McLennan,
and I'm Mr. Depressing.
Goodbye.
See you soon, folks.
Thank you for listening to the How to Raise Money podcast. It's made for people who want to raise money as debt or investment equity for their business or property proposal or empire. The website has all the useful links and underlying research, and you can get downloads of the checklists and other useful information. See you next time, where we can show you how to raise money. There is abundance. There is money enough for everyone on the planet. The question is, who has yours?